Snow had been falling for 3 days straight when my husband decided to break my leg. I remember the exact sound it made, not a snap like in the movies, more like a wet branch giving way under too much weight. My own scream came a half-second later, like my body needed time to catch up to what had just happened to it. It was December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. The tree in our living room was lit up with those warm white lights I'd insisted on, the ones I'd argued about with him at the hardware store back in November because he wanted the cheaper colored ones. I won that fight. I lost almost every other one in our 7 years of marriage, but I won that one. The lights were beautiful. They reflected off the hardwood floor in little golden puddles, and I stared at one of those puddles while I tried to remember how to breathe. My daughter was upstairs, 6 years old, in her room, supposedly asleep, but probably not, because she'd been bouncing off the walls all evening waiting for Santa. Her name is Poppy. She was the only thing keeping me from blacking out. The thought of her hearing me, of her coming down those stairs and seeing her mother on the floor, that was the only thing my brain could hold on to. Let me back up. My name is Larkin. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a small town in Vermont where my father owned the only hardware store on Main Street, and my mother taught second grade for 40 years before she passed. I met my husband. I'll call him by what he was, my husband, because his name doesn't deserve to be in my mouth anymore. I met him at a coffee shop in Burlington when I was 23. He was finishing his MBA. I was waitressing while I figured out what I wanted to do with an art history degree that nobody seemed to need. He was charming back then. Or at least, that's what I told myself for a long time. I think now what he actually was attentive. There's a difference. Charm makes you feel good. Attention makes you feel watched. But when you're 23 and lonely and haven't been looked at like that before, you don't know the difference yet. We got married 8 months after we met. My father didn't like him. I remember that, even though I pretended not to notice at the time. My dad had this way of going quiet around people he didn't trust. Not rude, just quiet, watchful. The way a hunter goes quiet in the woods. My husband took a job in Connecticut after the wedding, at a private equity firm where he wore expensive suits and came home smelling like other people's offices. We moved into a colonial on 3 acres in a town with too many golf courses. I tried to make friends. I tried to start a small business selling restored vintage frames online. He shut that down within a year, said it was embarrassing for him, his wife selling things on the internet like a flea market vendor. I closed the shop. I told myself I was choosing my marriage. That's what I told myself. Poppy came along when I was 26. The pregnancy was hard. He didn't come to most of the appointments. The night I went into labor, he was at a work dinner and didn't pick up his phone for 3 hours. My father drove down from Vermont in a snowstorm to be at the hospital. He was the first person to hold her after me. Things got worse after Poppy was born, not all at once. That's what people don't understand about this kind of thing. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens like water damage. You don't notice it until the ceiling is already sagging. The first time he hit me, Poppy was 11 months old. I had let her have a piece of his birthday cake without asking him. That was the reason, a piece of cake. He slapped me across the face in the kitchen, and then he cried, and then he held me and apologized for an hour. He said his father used to do the same thing to his mother, and he hated himself for it. He said it would never happen again. It happened again 4 months later. By the time Poppy was 3, I'd learned how to wear my hair in ways that covered the bruises near my hairline. I'd learned which of my long-sleeved shirts had cuffs that would stay buttoned during PTA meetings. I learned to apologize before he did, because if I apologized first, sometimes he'd let it go. What I had not learned, what I would not let myself learn, was that this was going to kill me eventually. My father saw it. I know he did. He never said anything. Not directly, but every time he came down to visit, he watched my husband the way he used to watch men who came into his store with prices marked wrong. And when he was leaving, he'd hug me a little too long, and he'd whisper something in my ear that I never told anyone about until much later. He'd whisper, "If you ever need me, you call, day or night. You call and I'll be there before the phone hits the cradle." I always laughed it off. I always said, "Dad, I'm fine." I was not fine. the thing that changed everything, the thing that made him decide to break my leg on a Tuesday night 2 days before Christmas, was a name. A woman's name. I found it on a credit card statement that had come to the house instead of his office, which was unusual. It was for a hotel in Stamford, a standing reservation, every Thursday for the past 14 months. I confronted him about it. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Should have known better. I had known better for years. But something in me had broken loose that week. Maybe it was Christmas coming. Maybe it was Poppy at the kitchen table asking me why Daddy never came to her school events. Maybe I just couldn't carry it anymore. He didn't deny it. That was the part that surprised me. He told me her name was Renly. He told me she was 26. He told me she was an analyst at his firm and that he was in love with her and that he had been planning to tell me after the holidays. Then he told me that if I tried to take Poppy from him or take a single dollar out of any account, he would make sure I never saw my daughter again. I asked him what he meant. He smiled. That's the thing I'll never forget. He smiled, the way he used to smile at me in that coffee shop in Burlington 8 years earlier. And he said, "Larkin, you have no idea what I'm capable of." That was Tuesday morning. By Tuesday night, I had made a phone call, just one, to my father. I didn't tell him everything. I just said, "Dad, I think I need help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then he said, "Are you somewhere safe right now?" I said, "He's at work." He said, "Listen to me very carefully. I want you to do 3 things. Are you listening?" I said, "Yes." He said, "First, I want you to put a little notebook somewhere, only you can find it. Tonight, write down every account number you can find, every password, every safe deposit box. Take photos of every important document and email them to yourself at an address he doesn't know about. Make a new email if you have to. Use the public library if you have to." I said, "Okay." He said, "Second, I want you to teach Poppy something. A code. Something she can do without him noticing. Something she'd do anyway. Like, does she have a stuffed animal?" I said, "She has a rabbit. She sleeps with it every night. She calls it Mr. Hopkins." He said, "Perfect. You teach her that if Mommy ever gets hurt, ever, even a little bit, she's going to take Mr. Hopkins downstairs and put him on the front porch. That's all. Just put the rabbit on the porch. Tell her it's a game. Tell her it's our secret signal. Don't make it scary. Make it like a treasure hunt." I was crying by then. I asked him what the third thing was. He said, "Third, you memorize my cell phone number, not the house number, my cell, and you teach Poppy to dial it, just those 10 numbers. You make her practice every day until she could do it in her sleep. And you tell her that if she ever sees Mommy hurt and can't get to me, she dials those numbers and she tells me where she is. That's all." He said, "Larkin, I love you. We are going to get you out of there, but it's going to take a few weeks. You have to be careful. Can you be careful?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm coming to you, not to the house. I'm getting a place nearby. I'll be 20 minutes from you by Thursday. You won't see me, but I'll be there." I taught Poppy the rabbit game on Wednesday morning. I made it sound like the best game in the world. I told her it was a secret between her and Grandpa, that Grandpa loved getting little signals like this from his favorite girl. She loved it. She practiced putting Mr. Hopkins on the porch like she was performing in a Broadway show. She practiced dialing my father's number on the old landline phone in the kitchen, the one my husband never used. She memorized it in 2 hours. 6-year-olds will surprise you. I started the notebook Wednesday night after he was asleep. I found things I didn't know existed. A second checking account in just his name. A safe deposit box at a bank I'd never heard of. Emails to a lawyer I'd never met about something called a post-nuptial agreement. There was a draft. He'd written my name on it but never asked me to sign. Tuesday night had been the confrontation about the affair. Wednesday, I'd done what my father told me. Thursday, he came home early. That's the part that scared me. He never came home early. Never. But on Thursday, December 23rd, he came home at 4 in the afternoon and he was already drunk and he had a small bag in his hand from a jewelry store I recognized. He set the bag down on the kitchen counter. He looked at me. He said, "I want you to know I bought her something for Christmas." I didn't say anything. He said, "I want you to know I'm leaving you. And I want you to know that I've already moved most of the money. Last night, while you were asleep, did you notice? You didn't notice. I had noticed. I had photos of the statements from before in my new email account on a server he couldn't access, but I didn't say that. He said, "I'm taking Poppy with me." That's when I made a mistake. I'd been holding it together so well. I'd been so careful. But when he said that, something broke loose in my chest, and I said, "Over my dead body." He stood up. He walked over to me very slowly, and he grabbed me by the hair. I'd like to tell you what happened next in the kind of orderly way you tell a story, but it didn't happen in an orderly way. It happened in flashes, the kitchen counter against my hip, his hand in my hair. The sound of something, a glass, I think, hitting the floor. My own voice, much smaller than I expected it to sound, saying his name, saying please. I saw Poppy at the top of the stairs, just for a second. She had Mr. Hopkins under her arm. I caught her eye. Just for a second, I mouthed the word, porch. She turned around and disappeared. He dragged me into the living room. He threw me onto the floor next to the Christmas tree, the one with the white lights I'd won the argument about. He was screaming things I don't remember now. I think I'd already gone somewhere else inside my head. I was watching the gold reflections of the lights on the floor, and I was thinking, very calmly, that I needed to keep him in this room. I needed to keep his attention on me. I needed to give Poppy time. He kicked me in the ribs. I curled up. He kicked me in the back. I curled tighter. He grabbed my leg and he twisted it, and he stomped down hard on my knee. That's the sound I told you about. The wet branch giving way. I heard it before I felt it. Then the pain came, and it was so big it didn't feel like pain anymore. It felt like the whole room had turned white. I don't know how long I was on the floor. It might have been a minute. It might have been 10. When my vision came back, he was standing over me with his phone in his hand, and he was saying something to someone. I think to her, to Renly, and he was laughing. He was actually laughing. Then I heard the front door. He didn't hear it at first. He was still on the phone, but I heard it. I heard the soft click of it opening, and the cold air coming in, and the small sound of small bare feet on the porch, and the small sound of something being set down. Mr. Hopkins. Then I heard the kitchen phone being lifted off the cradle. Slowly, carefully, like she was holding her breath, the way I taught her. I heard 6 small button presses. I heard 4 more. I heard her voice. She said, "Grandpa, it's me. Mommy looks like she's going to die. She's on the floor and she won't get up." She paused, listening. She said, "I put Mr. Hopkins on the porch like you said. I did the game." She paused again. She said, "Daddy is here. He's making Mommy bleed." That was when my husband heard her. He turned around. His face changed. He started walking toward the kitchen. Poppy said into the phone, "Grandpa, hurry." And then she did something I have replayed in my head 10,000 times. She did something that no 6-year-old should ever have to do. She put the phone down, very gently, on the kitchen counter, leaving the line open. And she walked, in her little nightgown, with her little bare feet, into the living room. She walked past her father. She walked over to me. She lay down next to me on the floor. She put her small arm across my chest. She said, "It's okay, Mommy. Grandpa's coming." My husband stopped. I will tell you, until the day I die, I do not know what stopped him, but he stopped. He stood there in the doorway of the living room, with his phone still in his hand, and he looked at his daughter lying next to her broken mother, and something passed across his face that I could not name. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was just calculation, the realization that this had gone too far, that there were going to be consequences this time. He went upstairs. I heard him moving around. I heard a closet open. I think he was packing. Sirens. I heard sirens before I heard my father's voice. But my father's voice came too, maybe 4 minutes after the sirens. He was the first one through the door. He had a bag with him, a doctor's bag. My father is not a doctor. But my father, it turns out, had spent 26 years of his life as a paramedic before he opened the hardware store. He never told me. He'd been a paramedic in the Army and then in our county, and he had quit when my mother got sick because he couldn't stand seeing other people's emergencies anymore. I learned this on the floor of my own living room, with my leg bent the wrong way, while my father stabilized me with the calm hands of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He looked at Poppy. He said, "You are the bravest girl I've ever known." She said, "I did the rabbit game, Grandpa." He said, "You sure did, sweetheart. You sure did." The police took my husband out of the house in handcuffs that night. They had the recording from the kitchen phone. They had Poppy's statement, taken with extraordinary gentleness by a female officer who knelt down to her eye level and let her hold a stuffed bear from the cruiser. They had the photographs I had taken of myself in the upstairs bathroom mirror over the past 3 years, the ones I had emailed to myself in the new account my father had told me to make. They had the credit card statements. They had the draft of the post-nuptial agreement. They had a lot. My leg was broken in 2 places. My tibia clean through and a hairline fracture in the kneecap. I was in a cast for 10 weeks, then a brace for another 6. I did physical therapy 3 times a week for almost a year. I still walk with a small limp when it's cold or when I've been on my feet too long. I have learned to think of it as a kind of medal, a reminder of what I survived. My husband was charged with felony aggravated assault, domestic battery, and child endangerment. His firm fired him within 48 hours. The mistress, Renly, gave a statement to the police that I have never read because I do not need to. She is not part of my story anymore. I learned during the trial that he had been planning something far worse than a divorce. There was a new life insurance policy on me that he'd taken out the month before, with a premium so large it had triggered a flag at the insurance company. There were searches on his work computer that the prosecutor put up on a screen in the courtroom and that I will not repeat here. There was a reason he came home early on December 23rd. The judge sentenced him to 12 years. He'll serve at least 8. I moved back to Vermont with Poppy 3 months after the trial ended. We live in a little farmhouse 15 minutes from my father's hardware store. Poppy is 7 now. She has a real rabbit, a soft gray one named Marigold, that she takes care of with the seriousness of a small surgeon. She still has Mr. Hopkins, but he lives on a shelf in her bedroom now, retired with full honors. I want to tell you 3 things before I go. The first is for anyone who is in that house right now, the house with the water damage you keep telling yourself isn't really there. I want you to know that the people who love you have already noticed. They are waiting for you to call. They have been waiting for you to call. They have been waiting for years. The phone call is not the hardest part. The hardest part is the lie you have been telling yourself, that you have to keep telling yourself in order to stay. You can put the lie down. You are allowed to put the lie down. The second is for the mothers. I know what it feels like to think that staying is the same thing as protecting your child. I thought that for years. I was wrong. The bravest thing I ever did for my daughter was to let her see me leave. The second bravest thing I ever did was to teach her a small game with a stuffed rabbit, so that she would know in her bones that her instincts were trustworthy. Children know more than we think. Honor that. Give them a way to act on what they know. The third is from my father. He will probably never see this. He doesn't know how to use the internet very well. But if anyone ever reads this to him, I want him to know that I think about that whisper of his, the one he gave me at the door for years and years. If you ever need me, you call. Day or night, you call, and I'll be there before the phone hits the cradle. I want him to know that I heard him. Every time. I just needed to believe I deserved to use that number. I deserved to use that number. So did you. If you're listening to this and you need it, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START to 88788. They are there. They have been there the whole time. You are a person. You deserve to be happy. Put the rabbit on the porch. I have spent the last 2 years trying to understand how a woman like me, a woman with a college degree, a father who loved her, a healthy childhood in a small town in Vermont, ended up on the floor of her own living room 2 days before Christmas with her leg broken in 2 places. And what I've come to believe is that none of it was random. Every single thing that happened to me was the slow, quiet result of 1,000 smaller choices I made years before the kick that finally broke me. The first choice was telling myself that attention was the same thing as love. It isn't. A man who watches you the way my husband watched me in that coffee shop in Burlington is not loving you. He is measuring you. I learned that too late. But I want you to know it now, before you make the same trade I did. The second choice was the smaller one I made every time he raised his voice, every time he raised his hand, every time he made me apologize for things I had not done. I told myself I was choosing peace. I was not. I was choosing silence. And silence is the soil that grows men like him taller. Every time I swallowed my own truth, I was watering the thing that was eventually going to try to kill me. But here is the part I want you to hold on to, because this is the part that matters. The same law that brought me to that living room floor is the law that got me out of it. Cause and effect cuts both ways. The phone call I made to my father on a Tuesday morning, the notebook I started Wednesday night, the little game I taught my daughter with a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hopkins. None of those things felt heroic when I did them. They felt like small, frightened acts performed by a woman who didn't know if she was strong enough. But they were the seeds, and on Thursday night, when I needed them, they had already grown into the thing that saved my life. What I want to leave you with is this. Strength is not a feeling. It is a series of small decisions made before you know you'll need them. Wisdom is not knowing the answer. It is being willing to ask the question, am I safe? Am I happy? Am I telling myself the truth, even when the answer is going to hurt? And character, real character, is what my Poppy showed when she walked past her own father in her nightgown and lay down next to her broken mother on the floor. She was 6. She had been taught a small game with a rabbit. And in the moment that mattered, she chose courage over fear, because somebody she trusted had told her, gently, that her instincts were worth listening to. Teach a child that. Teach yourself that. The phone call you are afraid to make today is the rescue you are going to need tomorrow. Make it anyway. You are worth the trouble it takes to save you.